welcome back to Geek Toolkit. I'm Joe Farrow. Today we're going to do a review of this remote right here. This is from a company called Sofabaton. I love that name. I think that's a great name. This is the U2 Universal Remote. Looks like this here. Very nice remote. This costs about $60 US. I'll link to the lowest price in the description below. I'm going to talk about what I like about this remote, and then I'm going to talk about what's awkward, and then we'll talk about things that maybe should be better, and then I'll talk about who I think this remote's for. Because if you follow my reviews, I do a lot of geeky gadget reviews, but I typically don't say it's good or bad unless it doesn't do what they say it does, then it's bad. But if it does what it says it does, then I'll talk about who I think it's for, which I think is a much more important thing for the user that's viewing. Because this remote, for some people, is going to be a great remote. Some people, this isn't going to do what they want. And I think that's the best thing I can give you as a reviewer. So let's start out with the good. This is a $60 remote. That is a very low price point for a universal remote that has a phone application built in, or I'm sorry, available that you can program it. The phone application is going to give you access to basically whatever library they have in the cloud to send those devices down to this. So if you have a Samsung TV, you'll look up basically the device. It basically maps the buttons. It says, okay, this is what it would make sense on this remote. And then it allows you to basically, over Bluetooth, program this remote. That's really cool. The other thing about this is an IR and Bluetooth remote, which means that not only can it control IR devices and learn IR, but it can emit Bluetooth as well. Now, it can't learn Bluetooth, but it does have some really cool profiles. It can emulate a keyboard. It can also control a lot of the big names, Chromecast, Apple TV, the NVIDIA Shields, the Fire Sticks, all of those types of Bluetooth devices, this thing will control natively. It has a OLED screen at the top here. That's basically the devices that it can control. So you see I've got three in here, a Samsung, a Denon receiver, and an Xbox. This is a scroll wheel to control that. And then you've got power, your menu, home, and back buttons. Then you've got a four-way directional with an OK button in the middle. You've got power and volume on the sides of it. Makes a lot of sense. And you've got transport controls and number control buttons on the bottom. I love how many buttons are on this thing because when you're doing an IR programming where you're basically taking one remote, pointed at this, and you're teaching this remote, you want a lot of buttons to be able to map stuff to that makes sense. We'll talk about the good and the bad of that later, but it has a lot of buttons. They also are clicky, which is very satisfying. You know when you hit the button, you know when it's activated, which is really handy. Now, this is the U2 remote, which is a sequel to the U1. The U1 didn't have as good of an IR range. They claim up to 33 feet on this. I didn't really measure 33 feet. I honestly can't get that far away from my TV, but I did measure across a sizable living room, and the IR on this was fairly well done. It did quite fine in that sense. They say it can replace up to 15 remotes, so this screen here where I've got 3 items, you could have up to 15. I think that would be pretty obnoxious, but it is nice to have that ability. One of the ways that a lot of the lower end remotes basically upsell you is they say this one can do 4, this one can do 8, so this one doing 15 is really nice. The batteries on it are just AA batteries. There's no proprietary battery in here that you have to worry about if it dies. You have no cables that you have to worry about losing. Basically, put in some AA batteries and it's good to go. I really appreciate the simplicity of that, especially given that the Harmony remotes, some of those batteries would die after 6 or 7 years and they were built in, and then you're kind of stuck. So you have to, do surgery on your remote. AA's, can't knock it. It's nice, it's inexpensive, and it's replaceable. The keys on here, when you program it down from your phone, you can do 2 things with these keys. You can accept the layout. You can also change them or reassign them. So what I can do here is like this red button on a Samsung TV. It might be, one of the special buttons for the TV. I might want to program that to launch the browser instead or launch Netflix. And so if the remote capability is built into the TV, I can program these to do it. That is really, really cool because like the ability to launch the browser on the Samsung TV with the normal remote isn't even there. I have to actually go down to the app or pin it to a screen, and then I've got to scroll through. Having like one button launch of that is super convenient, and I really appreciated that about this remote. I like the ability ability to say, I don't want your layout that you gave me, I want to rearrange it. You have full capability to make any button do anything you want. The other thing about this is you can make any button be a macro. Now, for those that aren't familiar, a macro for a remote is the ability to send multiple button presses, and this one can send macros for multiple devices. That means that I can make the power button here turn on my Xbox, turn on the TV and the receiver with that one button press. That's 3 different devices, but that one button press can send those 3 things. Now, any button on here can be programmed or converted over to a macro button, which is very powerful. Now, let's talk about what's awkward. The thing about this is when you're programming it, you have the app up on your phone and you point the remote at the TV, but you hit the button on the app to test it. So if I'm trying to find out if I got the right TV model in here, I point it at my TV and then I hit the power button on the phone and it sends over Bluetooth the remote and then it sends it to the TV. I get why they do that. The Bluetooth connection is not fast on this thing, and to send the full remote over so I can test on the remote takes about 30 seconds, which isn't ideal. So to work around this, you basically search on your phone for a model. You say, okay, I think this is the right one. It says hit the power button. You point this at the TV and you hit it over here. Just felt awkward. Every now and then I get this odd error message. It's like bag is not found. I don't know what that is. I hate getting an error message that I have no idea what went wrong or how to fix it. But here we are. The device types are really confusing. So when you're programming this, and say I was programming my Denon receiver, there were 4 options. There was TV, box, like BOX, box, DVD, or PA system. That was my 4 options. I was like, I don't know what this is. I think, it's a box. So I chose box. Well, I chose the wrong thing. The thing is, there's just some really quirky things about the way the app works, and I've given this feedback to the company. We'll see if they update the app and make this better, but it turns out the receiver was under PA. The Xbox is under box, which, okay, that makes sense, but so would be any cable box, set-top box. The DVD player is also Blu-ray player, so things are just kind of in weird spots, and there's not a lot of categories. So again, awkward. Not a deal breaker, but it makes it the usability a bit harder when you don't know where to look for some stuff. Another one, and this is something I'm just kind of getting tired of. I mean, this might be the world we live in, but to set up this remote on the application, I had to register a username and a password and an email. Why? I don't understand why. I asked the company why. They haven't gotten back to me, and when they do, I'll put it in the description. But I don't understand why everything needs an account. Is it just to spam me with trying to sell me more remotes? I don't know, but when I buy the remote, and I appreciate it has an app, I don't want to have to sign up for an account to do that. That makes the whole experience from the out of box to getting it used just much more painful than it needs to be. Now, I'm going to get into some of the negatives, and this one, I didn't know if I was going to put it in negative or awkward, so I'm just going to talk about it. It's a concept of what's called a discrete on-off system. This is something to look for in any system that has a universal remote, but it's also important your devices have to support it as well. What a discrete on-off remote code is the ability to send an actual off versus toggling power. Here's what I mean by that. If I hit this power button and my TV is on, it will turn off. If I hit it again, it will turn on. That makes sense. If I'm only controlling the TV, this is fine. What if I'm controlling the TV, the Xbox, and a receiver at the same time? I might want to make a macro button of this that turns each one of those on. If I don't have the ability to send turn on, and it just sends toggle, say I'm watching TV, the TV is on, the receiver's on, the Xbox is off, and I hit that button. Now the Xbox turns on because it got toggled from off to on, but everything else just turned off. That's not what I wanted at all. And now I'm in a worse state because I have to go switch to a TV device, hit the toggle button for it, switch to a receiver, hit toggle. That's just as bad as having 3 remotes. A discrete on-off button or a discrete on-off code, if supported by the device, because again, not every TV and stuff supports it, being able to send that here would be super powerful, because then I can say, send the on to my Xbox, send on to the TV, send on to the receiver. If they're already on, everything will just work the way I would expect it to. But I didn't see the codes or the capabilities in this remote for any of those devices. And that kind of nerfs the whole ability or usability of a macro. My macros that I want to turn everything on and set inputs. I can't do that if it doesn't know how to basically control it unless I make sure everything is off or in the same state every time I'm starting out. That's just simply not how I use my stuff. And we'll talk about this at the end. We talk about who this is for. All right, let's talk about a couple of downsides. One is it has 500,000 devices in their database. That being said, it didn't find some devices that I would just expect to be in there. One of them is a Samsung TV from last year. Samsung's one of the largest makers of TVs. from last year is not that long ago, but it's long enough that I would expect it to be in the database. It wasn't in there. The other thing is, my TV, my Samsung remote is Bluetooth, which means I don't have to have line of sight. This, in the Bluetooth section, didn't have any Samsung TVs. So that meant the only way I could program my Samsung TV into this is as an IR device, which means I lose line of sight capabilities with my TV. For a lot of people, that won't matter. And again, we'll talk about this at the end of who this is for. But for me personally, it's a step backwards to go from a Bluetooth RF type control to an IR type control. The other thing is, not having my TV in here meant that it was really weird when I'm programming this because I don't know, not all of the buttons that my TV supports are in here. I don't have a Disney Plus ability to launch this, which is great for my daughter to give her a single button to launch from. So that database of items, as big as it is, wasn't super helpful for me. The Denon receiver I have is 2 years old. It's still sold today. I'm sorry, 3 years old, still sold today, but it also wasn't in there. And so again, I ended up in the situation where half my receiver got programmed correctly and half of it didn't. Another really big negative for me is when you program the buttons and you download stuff to the app, it shows these, like all of the buttons on the remote and it highlights them in green, but it doesn't tell you what any of them do. You basically have to say, okay, I think this does what I want it to do, program the remote, hit the buttons, and just find out what happens. My receiver, the 1, 2, 3, and 4 ended up being quick change buttons, and none of the other numbers got programmed. I get that they have to kind of map stuff over, but it would be nice to actually have words saying what these functionalities are. Some of them were pretty close, but some of them I just had no idea what these buttons did. I think the red, green, yellow, and blue ended up doing weird stuff on my receiver that I didn't expect. It made sense when I hit them, but just tell me in the app what you did. You have a whole app on the phone that you downloaded stuff to. Just let me know what it is. Now, this next gripe is going to be true. I'm going to say it about every remote until somebody figures out how to do it. If you have a remote, especially like a receiver that has 60 or 70 buttons, and you're trying to program this, pointing them at each other and hitting every single button and saying, I want this button to be this button to be this, is going to be tedious. It can take you hours to program. It's just the nature of these remotes that program via IR learning. Now, it's okay if the database works really well, but I just told you that a couple of things that were fairly recent weren't in here. So just be aware of that. One thing that really worries me about these remotes and this app capability is the app can program the remote, but typically they don't have a way to back up the remote in such a way that if the app, say the company goes under, or say it's like Logitech, where they didn't go under, they just said, you know what, we're not going to support Harmony or make Harmony remotes anymore. It's not a big enough business. Well, if a company does that and they have an app, and that app is the only way to program the remote, and the app and the company goes under, then this becomes a brick, and that's always a fear of mine. Now, it's not so bad on a $50 or $60 device, but like on the higher end ones, it is a concern of mine. Like, is the company going to be around? And if their app isn't, am I going to be able to use the remote? This remote has no way that I can tell to program it without connecting to a phone. Now, there's a couple of things I want. They're not nitpicks so much as I just wish it had it. I wish I had the ability to create a blank remote. Like, I can create a Samsung remote, I can create a Denon remote, I can create an Apple TV remote. I just want to create a blank remote, call it Joe remote, and then I want to be able to say what the buttons do. I can kind of do that if I style it after another remote, download those codes, and then change every button to what I want and rename it. But it'd be nice in the app to just say, generate my own remote, because the way I use my TV, that would be really useful. The icons right here, there's only like 6 choices. I don't know why there's only 6, and I didn't think they were super great or inspiring, but I'd like to have more. I'd like to have an Xbox and a PS4 logo and an Apple logo and so on. I'd like to have just more options or be able to upgrade it or something. And maybe that's one of the ways they sell their higher end remotes, but for me, I just wasn't inspired by the 5 or 6 icon options or the font that's used on the OLED screen. It's okay, but it could be better. All right, let's wrap this up and talk about who is this remote for and who is it not. This remote is great if you find yourself with 2, 3, 4 remotes and they're just annoying. You maybe have an Apple TV and a Chromecast. I don't know if Apple TV and a Fire TV is probably more likely, something like that. You have a TV and a receiver as well. You've got like 4 remotes and you just want to get rid of it and get it down to 1. No problem. This remote is great for that. The remote is made for you. Who is it not made for? Well, I talked about some of the situations I have. If you have You want to control game consoles, home automation, RF. If you really need you don't want line of sight to be required because you have your stuff behind doors or, hidden away, stuff like that, then this remote's not going to be great for you. It's just not. I'm really disappointed that it didn't have my Samsung TV in the Bluetooth section. I like the remote. I think it does everything that they said it would do, and it's built well, and it feels like quality. It doesn't feel like they went cheap on it. And again, it did everything it said. I think the app needs work. I think, I've given them a lot of feedback via email, and if they implement that, then I think it'll be a lot better experience. But for now, they're in this weird spot where the app needs a bit more technical use or somebody that's willing to fiddle, whereas the remote is, kind of basic for a lot of the people that would fiddle. So I don't know where this is going to end up, but I've given you my take on it. Now, that said, if anything comes back from the company or I see the software update, I'll update the description to basically let you know. Other than that, that's my take on this remote. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I am Joe Farrow, Geek Toolkit. Till next time.